Greetings, amigops. This week, with Top 10 with Kyle and Mike, I'm going to be working on modulating my volume a little bit better. But seriously though, Kyle and I are joined this week, as we have been many weeks recently, by a very special guest. This week, we're joined by one of our very best friends, Sarah. I don't even have to ask what the topic is this week. We'll be talking about the top 10 best plays by Todd Frazier. Maybe? If that doesn't quite suffice, we'll be talking about the top 10 Cincinnati Reds of all time. I don't know, something like that. At any rate, whatever this topic is, we'll be discussing it, debating it vigorously, and by the end of the episode, we'll have a definitive top 10. So, dear friends, what is this week's top 10?
Oh, well, thank you, Mike, for that beautiful intro, but while you were correct in saying Cincinnati Reds are amazing and everything possible, it was probably one of my discussions that I had with Kyle about possible topics. Reds, baseball, Cincinnati sports in general, all of the above. But you guys had already done some baseball topics, so figured we would switch it up this week. Kyle and I actually both came upon this topic together. We were having a great discussion, as one does, in a kitchen during a lovely evening gathering. Beverages were involved.
It really just... Sarah and I had had a few each at Sarah's place, or standing in her kitchen right after we'd gotten something out of the fridge, and right in front of us was her spice rack.
It's a beautiful spice rack. I worked very hard to hang that perfectly level on my wall, and it spurred a conversation that we just felt needed to be brought to you, Mike, and that is, what are the top 10 kitchen spices?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I love this so much.
We discovered there was a passion between both Kyle and I about what was the most important spice to have in your spice rack, and that just spiraled into many, many others that should or should not be included in your go-to spices.
Yeah, I think we realized, like, pretty much at the same time that the arguments we were having would lend itself pretty well to a top 10 list. So here we are. I mean, this was several months ago, so I apologize for the delay, but we're doing
here.
it.
We made it.
This is so interesting because I am thinking about all my spices that I love, and there are just certain dishes that require a lot of different spices. I'm thinking about my chili. I love the thing about, like, different spices is, depending on my mood, I can dial it up to make it a hot dish, or I can almost make it kind of a sweet dish. Mm-hmm. And it's all about them spices.
It's the beauty of making a combination of whatever you want and kind of throwing it together in a pot and rolling with the punches. I think that's the cool thing about cooking and why I've enjoyed getting into it, because of the variety.
Well, I think spices are the easiest way to add your own kind of flair to any given dish.
Very true.
Yeah.
Because you can only tamper so much with what actually goes into the meal, but how you season it, and that has a lot of personality to the individual cook.
Right.
So.
And I guess should preference this by saying not an actual cook. Background includes a total of maybe 3 years of real world expertise, a lot of Food Network, me pretending to know what I'm doing, and a lot of winging it.
In that same vein, spices can really help an amateur cook like you or me cover up a lot of mistakes in actual cooking technique.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think it's really important. I'll get my TV references out of the way early so we can focus on the real business at hand. But the most obvious and just wonderful, my dad would be very disappointed if I didn't mention it, example of an amateur cook covering up his inadequacies with spices is Frank Costanza. While serving as a cook during the Korean War, has a batch of meat that has come in and is clearly past its date, but decides to cook for his platoon anyway. And he says, I figured with just the right combination of spices, and you see him dumping, like an Old Bay, just dumping it and then smacking the flat end of a butcher's knife onto the meat to try to get it just right. So that's like the amateurs work with spices. Now, a professional with spices is somebody more like Nick Miller from New Girl, who makes his famous sauce, which includes like mayonnaise, ketchup, a little bit of salt. There's like a spider that falls into it, and somehow it ends up being delicious. You never know the alchemy of the spices. You never know.
Right.
That's not even my favorite spice-related New Girl reference. When Cece cooks with Schmidt for the first time, rule number 1, don't tell me I'm cooking with too much tarragon because I'm not.
That's a great point.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so that was one of the rules that, not an expert cook, so judge me as you will. Number 2 was I left off 2 important things that I know people cook with daily, but I thought they would not bring as much variety to the conversation, so we cut out salt and pepper. Just lopped them off the entire list. Thought it would be too much, especially with the variety of salts that you can get into. Yeah. Didn't want to spiral down there.
I think that's a legitimate move, because I think Kyle and I have dealt with this sometimes with the top 10s, is there are times when it feels like an inevitable march towards number 1. You know, won't spoil too many of our pods, but like, let's say Spies, for example. Everybody knows what number 1 is going to be, and I've done the same with a bunch of my lists too, like, you know, Fictional Dogs, for example. Like, we all know who number 1 was going to be. I guess some people disagreed and we might have missed a few. But at least knowing I was doing the list, yes. Knowing I was doing the list. So I think that's legitimate. I think it's pretty obvious to all of us that either salt, like, you know, plain old salt or plain old pepper would be number 1 and the other one would be number 2. So I'm down with that move.
Right. And then the last thing that I just wanted to call out is the fact that I did include fresh herbs as a part of this. So not just your dried spices in the rack, because I started getting into some of the things that you can grow on your windowsill if you have a green enough thumb, I guess. So I wanted to bring that in too as a possibility.
Herbs and spices.
Yes, I guess that would be a better title for this.
All right. I'm going to change the title here. Okay.
So then I guess
let's roll into it. What's number 10?
Diving into number 10, drumroll please, to start us off, we have the best little bit of spice, little bit of nice cayenne.
Oh.
I have found that this spice is an easy combination to just throw in with a couple of other, your very standard spices that we'll get to later. It doesn't really stand on its own, so that's why I didn't bump it up in the list, but I do find myself reaching for it to just add a little bit more of a pep to my step in a bunch of dishes.
We'll say with cayenne, like, the taste by itself, like you said, is not very distinctive, but it's what I go to when I'm trying to make something spicy.
Right.
And you really don't need much of it.
Exactly.
We're starting off hot on this list.
Yeah. It's got a nice smoke to it. Like, it's more of a rich kind of smoky heat as opposed to some of the other heats. Like, I think the tangy or the sweet heat is a very different brand, and this has got the nice smoky heat. The only thing that I think knocks cayenne and some of its friends is that it's more friendly to like a soup or a broth base, like something like a chili. It's a little tougher to work into the grill rotation.
Yeah.
Now, I say that from my vantage point. Dear friend Quinn is likely busy because, spoiler alert, he is now a papa. So he's likely too busy to notice this. But on the off chance that he happens to be listening, I'm sure it's lovely as a dry rub on his grill. But I think this family of spices, it doesn't have quite the versatility, but damn, it's got the taste.
Exactly. So wanted to throw that in, solid 10, just get you started with a little bit of kick to your step. Yeah. Next one, coming in at number 9, is good old oregano. Very standard base, throw it into a bunch of your Italian dishes. Also, I find myself adding it to roasted vegetables and even some like Mediterranean dishes that I'll make. Not overwhelming. I never go, oh my gosh, that's oregano in whatever I'm eating right now. But yeah. I feel like it's still one of those base things that you must have in your rack to pull and go to, because so many recipes draw from it.
Now, when you're picturing oregano, is the image in your head the dried oregano kind of flakes, or are you picturing fresh oregano? What's your image?
Image right now is just those dried flakes. I don't know if I've ever actually cooked with fresh oregano.
Nor have I.
Have you?
I think that my family uses fresh oregano from time to time, but I know that one time my sisters and I made some soup for my parents. We were like, 10, 8, and 6 or something like that. We decided to be really nice. My parents have been out for the day, which is very irregular at that age. And we made them some soup, and we accidentally did the chopped up dried oregano, but didn't convert it.
Ooh.
And it was inedible, but our parents trooped on for us and pretended that it was edible. It was not.
Like good
They are
parents.
good parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm with you guys. It's an unsung hero.
The thing about oregano is that a recipe calls for it like 1 in every like 4 times I cook, and I think this was true when I used to live with Dylan and Quinn and Jameson. We all would cook for each other. And so like, it's the kind of spice where the recipe calls for it and you're like, do we have oregano? And so we had like 6 oreganos in our cabinet because you can't remember. You're like, we probably do, but I don't want to get back and not have it. So like we had 6 of them.
This is such a brilliant observation, and I think should weigh on how we feel about these things.
That's true.
Certainly.
This is a brilliant observation.
I had the opposite problem, though, because just the other day I was cooking a recipe and I just assumed I had oregano, got home, realized was out of oregano, and had to be that person in the line at the grocery store with one thing in my hand, a jar of oregano.
What's interesting about that particular scenario is, and I don't want to spoil anything further up on your list, I think there are a couple suitable oregano substitutes that you could get by with in a pinch.
That's
with
true.
a pinch of said spice.
Oh, boy.
That's right.
I'm now so intrigued because I assume that if I were to walk out this door right now and go to my kitchen, that I have oregano. I think maybe this is the start of our online polls. Like, does Mike have 0, 1, or more than 1 container of oregano? And I will participate in the poll and most likely be wrong.
You're just as likely to have 3 of these as none. At least,
Yeah.
That's for me personally. But
It's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
anyways, that's oregano.
Solid and necessary. Sometimes you have way too much. Sometimes you have none. It just flies under the radar, but still worthy of a top 10 spot.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, then moving on up, the next spice that I had, which I think is going to get a little bit of pushback, but this is personal bias coming into play. At number 8 is cumin.
There's only one person who doesn't want cumin on this list, Kyle. Who's that?
It's Stuart Dunmire, a.k.a. Pierce Brosnan and Mrs. Doubtfire.
I think there's 2 people.
Oh, wait, no.
One is,
that's paprika.
yes, his is paprika. We're thinking of the dad from Drake and Josh, right?
That's right. Yep. Damn it.
No, you knew where I was going. You knew.
Don't they put cumin in his waffles?
Yes. I don't know why.
Those guys are always getting into shenanigans.
They're always up to something.
Okay. Make the case for cumin.
Yeah. So this is the case for cumin at 8 because I do know it is used in many, many, many recipes and apparently waffles too. It is so overwhelming to me that I find myself dialing back any recipe that calls for cumin by half. It has this very overwhelming, smoky flavor to me that's so distinctive that it just doesn't play well with spices in the way that people want me to cook with it. So this is one of those moments where I always find myself mixing things up and changing the portions of spices. It's because cumin is just over the top. I know it's used a lot, but I had to knock it just because it's not my favorite.
On Kyle's personal list of spices, on my personal top 10 spice rack, cumin is very high. I cook with it a lot.
Right.
It's similar to cayenne in that it usually goes into some more savory things. My chili, heavy on the cumin. Eggs from Hell, which I just made tonight. One thing I like about cumin as opposed to a cayenne is that it's a little less actual heat and has a little more flavor, which means I can also use it. I'll sprinkle it really lightly on top of vegetables, broccoli or asparagus. And it's like just enough. And you really don't need much of it if you're going to do it like that. I feel like it's divisive flavor though, because if you're it's a really strong flavor. So if you're into it, you're into it, like
Right.
me. And if you're not, then
Like
you can
me.
tell. You can always tell when it's there.
Exactly.
See, I have to utterly disagree with both of you. Not because I think you're wrong, but because I think I'm totally ignorant here. Because when you said cumin, I'm like, I know what cumin is. I could pick it out in the spice rack. Not least which because all of these spices tend to be labeled. It's very helpful. But because I do know what it looks like. I actually don't think I know what cumin tastes like. And I think the reason I don't know what it tastes like is because the only time I ever use it is when it's called for. So I'm not going out and adding a little like, ooh, this needs cumin. And when it's called for in most of these recipes, it's called for in combination with like 12 other spices. Yeah. So I've already combined them or I've, dropped them in the pot. And so I don't actually think I know what cumin tastes like.
You'd recognize if you eat it like a good Mexican restaurant, you'll taste a lot of it.
Indian has a lot of cumin in it as well.
That's a good example. Like I love Indian cuisine and anytime I make some Indian food, I've already thrown a bunch of other spices, and so I'm like, oh, that tastes lovely, and I'm not picking out specific spices in that case.
Yeah. I will agree with Kyle's statement that it goes well if you're roasting things. I find myself throwing it on chickpeas every now and again, but it's always in combination with something else. It never flies solo for me.
For me, I will put it solo, or I'll put it, and this is a good argument for why salt and pepper maybe should ultimately stay off the list, is it's a given that I'm also going to be seasoning whatever I'm seasoning with salt and pepper.
Yeah.
But you're right. Typically, I don't want to list off a bunch of spices that are going to end up further on your list. But I'm thinking of a particular, big three when you're making something savory that go into pretty much all of them, and cumin is one of those, for
exactly.
sure.
So, hence why it is on the list. Just gets knocked because, again, personal feelings about this spice.
Fair enough.
All right. Then the next major player that I wanted to bring up, still coming in at 7, so a little low, but definitely on the list because of its variety, is basil.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. And this is definitely one of those that I was toying with and what brought me into the herbs and spices life, because basil is so easy to use in both that fresh form and also the dried from your rack form.
Absolutely. I think, to me, the argument for basil comes down purely to the classic fresh pizza. Just like a pizza with tomato, basil, mozzarella. That's it. That's all it needs. I can't think of another spice, or herb that would fit in that way. I don't want to say them as Kyle. I don't want to name a bunch, but there's a couple of spices and herbs out there that are really wonderful. Basil is just, And I have a memory of my grandfather's garden growing up and him having me walk around and pick stuff and smell different things. And basil is so fragrant on the vine in a way that most herbs and spices kind of aren't. That smell it's very symbolic to me of a childhood smell that I love, and it's cool how much it stands on its own in a pizza.
I remember making just fresh tomato and basil on a Triscuit as a kid that my mom would make too.
Wow, well.
Yeah. Just
very
easy.
refined young child. That. Watching the Reds.
Watching the Reds with my basil and my tomatoes. Just living my best life in the Cincinnati. Absolutely.
Adding basil more so than the ones we've talked about so far is more of a garnish than a cooking spice. Mm-hmm. For me, basil usually gets topped at the end on a pizza, on pasta, on top of anything with tomato, any kind of tomato base. Yeah. But it adds visually and taste wise so much fancy to whatever you're cooking. Mm-hmm. Your pasta just went from shitty canned tomatoes and elbow noodles that you threw into the pot after work into a really nice refined dish that a young adult prepared for thyself. You know what I mean?
It elevates it. It's an elevating herb spice, whatever we're calling it.
I think it kind of straddles the line.
Yeah.
It's kind of in both camps.
Yeah.
Definitely. So that was a strong contender. Again, there are more that I topped over it. open to discussion in the future on this, but this was the first one that really pulled me away from just that spice rack because I wanted to talk more about the variety that you can include in the fresh portion of basil.
Sure. Did you think about a not top 3 at all?
Oh, I don't think I necessarily thought of a not top 3. I think I just have a top 10 of things that didn't make it in.
I think that's reasonable. This is a difficult one to go not for, because I think that the list of spices that gets called for, at least in sort of like the typical cuisine that we might be cooking, has been winnowed down pretty well over the years.
Yeah.
To the point where there's a good stable. Like the stable of spices is good. What's out there is good. And I think the rest of it, the stuff that you and our taste buds might say is bad, are things that we're probably not familiar enough with to like have a really good stance on. Like, is cardamom good? I don't think I know. I don't know. I hope that's not your number one.
I did bring it up in my list of like,
wow.
But what about cardamom? Because I also brought up a lot of different things. But I agree that it's not necessarily bad. It's just, what are you used to?
Yeah.
And what have you grown up or become accustomed to when cooking?
Yeah, and I think that's sort of the interesting thing about this list is it's so dependent upon your experiences that I think you kind of work from like the best of breed in the cuisine you know, and the rest of it is sort of a black box.
I guess I would throw, the only one I would put up for contention in the not top 3 is the garlic flake, because the garlic flake, in my opinion, I've used the garlic flake in the past as a substitute for real garlic, and it's just not the same.
And this is different from garlic powder.
Yes, because I think
this is also different from minced garlic.
Correct.
What the hell is this then?
I think I know what you're talking about, but I've never purchased it to keep
I'll grab it out of the cupboard if you want. I'll show it to you if you want. But it's like, it's not powder. It's not garlic powder. It's thicker than that. It's like flakes is the best way to describe it. It's like flakes of garlic. And like I said, I tried to use it as a substitute for actual minced or like do it your DIY garlic, and the flavor is not there. So that's like why this exists is confusing to me, and that's why I would throw it on the not top 3. That's the one
why does that exist? I'm with you. That seems like something that would have just shown up in Bunnicula, but it shouldn't exist in real life.
Right. So
I accept that introduction.
Both of your ignorance to the garlic flake just shows who I'm hanging with here.
Right? I think I know what you're talking about once you have brought it up as something of that exists, but why? Again, why?
Yeah. It's for...
I would like to see a recipe that calls for garlic flakes.
Yeah, exactly. No such recipe exists. It's for people that don't want to mess with garlic.
Well, this is interesting. That actually kind of brings up a point that I'm thinking about as we think about these spices, is I think that the danger factor is important, because I think the reason that the garlic flake probably exists, and this is pure conjecture because I still don't know what it is, but I'm imagining it might exist to allow for a different like baseline intensity of garlic. Because I think garlic powder, for example, you immediately run a stronger risk of having too much garlic than if you use fresh garlic. Now, you gain back in terms of ease, you gain back in terms of mess and all that stuff, but you have the added risk of just totally overdoing the garlic. And so I think there are certain spices on here that are safe. Like salt is a good example from something that's not on the list. You're basically safe with salt. It takes an awful lot of salt to oversalt a dish. It doesn't take a ton of, certain other spices to overdo it. Like cumin's a good example. Cumin, there's a much greater chance of ruining a dish with cumin than there is with something like salt.
Yep, that's true. It's been done by me before.
I have made that mistake of tablespoons versus teaspoons with cumin. Again, regretted it.
Yeah, you gotta look out for that D.
Right.
Alright, well, that's enough in the top 3 then. Wanna roll into 6?
let's roll into 6. I think this will come with some contention from one of the members of this podcast, because I believe we had previously talked about it. But coming in at 6 is the crushed red pepper. This is something that I believe goes on pizza. When I researched a little bit, people also seem to like putting it into soups. But while it is very, I guess that's important. I'm not a big soup person.
I love soup.
Yeah. So maybe that plays too into, again, my positioning of crushed red pepper at number 6, but it's something that I don't think I've used maybe more than 1/8 of the bottle in my spice rack.
Oh my lord.
Excuse me.
Crushed red pepper is one of the only spices I've ever, like, actually gotten to the bottom of it and been like, shit, I need more red pepper. Like in a short amount of time I've done this, you know?
Yeah.
It's to the point now where I can't even eat pizza or pasta without red pepper flakes.
Oh,
like, regardless
pasta.
of the type of pasta, red pepper flakes are going on it. Regardless of the type of pizza, red pepper flakes are going on that. I wouldn't say regardless of the type of soup, but I love making tomato soup and grilled cheese, and I always dump a bunch of red pepper flakes in the tomato soup.
Oh.
Red pepper flakes and basil.
I like the sound of that. What's interesting about the red pepper flake that kind of stands out from the other items here is that it's almost exclusively an after spice.
Yes.
I can't actually think of an instance in which I've put red pepper flakes into a recipe while cooking. It's a finisher, which is interesting. It kind of positions it differently, because for me, I'm more of a mid-spicer than an after-spicer. I like to spice while I cook and then eat it as is, and I think I have a little bit of vanity as a cook that, like, I prefer my guests eat that same way. Caroline, longtime girlfriend, steadily refuses to do so. No matter what I offer her, she spices it. She can be standing in front of me as I dump salt into the eggs that I'm making her. She then puts salt on it. At any rate, I'm not bitter about it, though. I think that the red pepper flakes are situated interestingly in that regard, because my whole family, other than me, because I like to leave food kind of as it is once it's done. My mom, my grandfather, they just dump red pepper flakes on everything.
I think I've accidentally insulted dear friend of the pod, Dill, many times, because pretty much anything he cooks, I put red pepper flakes on, because he makes such amazing Italian food. Like, he makes me pasta, I put red pepper flakes on it. He makes me, and mac and cheese, I put red pepper flakes on it. It makes it better. And I think, Dylan, I'm sorry, but, like, it has nothing to do with your cooking. I love it so much. It's just, I love to put it. I like the heat.
What does that say, though, about its ability to play well with others? I think this is one of those spices that, again, when you bring into a dish, it's the dominant player. It's going to completely overwhelm everything else you got going on.
See, I'd make the argument that red pepper flakes don't really taste like much.
Point exactly, then why are we needing them in anything that we do?
Because it, more so than cayenne, it gives you the kick of cayenne without really changing the flavor profile of what you're eating.
Okay.
Pizza's a great example. I think pizza is the ultimate pair with these red pepper flakes, because you have that tang, you have that acidic taste from the tomatoes, and especially taking a pizza like something with like a really tomatoey profile, so a lot of sauce, or something with like fresh tomato on it. It's got the tang, and I think what Kyle's getting at is those red pepper flakes don't dull or change or overwhelm the tang. They escalate it and add a heat to it. So instead of having like a tomato pepper, you're having a spicy tomato. It changes the tomato into a spicy tomato rather than like fundamentally altering the taste.
Well, really well put, Mike.
Thanks,
I
dog.
really like spicy food, so the red pepper flake is my go-to when I want something to be spicier and I don't want it to change the way it tastes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Okay. We'll take that into consideration as
We
move
appreciate, Sarah, we appreciate your humility in putting your personal feelings aside and ranking this highly to begin with.
You're a better
Exactly.
top tenor than us,
Yeah.
than we.
Yeah, you're a true understander of the pot. Or at least its mission.
I docked cumin so much with my own personal feelings that I felt like I couldn't also do that with crushed red pepper.
So this is a guilt 6 for crushed red pepper.
Absolutely.
That's fine. We will take a guilt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then coming in at number 5 is a newfound love of mine and used frequently in my cooking. It is ginger. Ginger
Ooh.
is something as a child I thought I disliked. It was one of those dishes or tastes that my mother did not like, therefore I believed I did not like. And it wasn't until probably, I would say, within the past 2 years that I started tasting ginger, experimenting with it in a lot of my dishes, especially when I make Thai cuisines or anything along the lines of Indian, Japanese, whatever you have there, that I love adding ginger into what I'm doing. Also, just eating it straight up off of sushi trays now is life-changing. I didn't even know how great it could be. So,
wait, that's ginger?
Yeah, like the little pickled stuff that sits on the side with
that I like
wasabi.
devour before my sushi even gets there?
That is ginger.
Oh.
I know, right?
I've always wondered what that was and just never asked or looked it up. I've just eaten it.
just fully accepted, whatever this is.
Well, and just by coincidence, I don't think I've ever cooked with ginger, so I never made the connection in my head.
Yeah. So I specifically remember recently making a really nice curry, and in it called for fresh ginger, and I think I used an entire root of just fresh, chopped up, let it simmer in the curry, and you would just bite into it and get this burst of flavor that went along with it. So that being said, I cook mostly with fresh ginger, not like your little powdered stuff, just because it's so much more fragrant, but I think the powder is an okay substitute as well. But because of its variety of forms, clearly sushi, powder, fresh, goes great as tea too. And it's
also as ale.
Ginger beer.
Yes.
Yum.
Great new thing that I discovered was easy to drink outside of airplanes too. Ginger ale. Who knew? But it's overlapping of different cuisines was what brought it in at 5. I feel like a lot of things that we've been talking about before, cumin, outside of that, are very individual to a certain type of cuisine. With the red pepper, it's pizza, or with the oregano, again, it's still Italian in that sense.
Well, not only that, exactly. Like prior to this, it's been a lot of Italian style spices and meals, and ginger. Don't think you'd put that on pizza or pasta.
I don't think that would. It plays well with tomatoes. You just have to use more, again, of Asian cuisine instead of that oregano basil base that you generally put into an Italian dish.
Ginger's interesting. I suspect that I like ginger more than I know, because the only times that I know I'm consuming ginger is the every third or fourth time I get sushi that I try to nibble a little bit of that ginger just to see if I like it this time. And I don't. But by that measure, there's a lot of spices that I wouldn't like, because who really likes just consuming a spice straight up, other than Kyle, it seems. So that's sort of my outward exposure with ginger, but I sense that I probably like it in other stuff, because I think when it's toned down or when it's playing its part, to accompany other flavors, I like it. And I love Asian food. I'm pretty much, whatever you throw in front of me, I'll eat it. And since a lot of that leverages the ginger, I'm imagining that I probably like it more than I even know. And I think ginger gains huge points, as you said, for how widely used it is by different cuisines.
Right. And the thing about the ginger that is on the side of your sushi, let me say that again. The thing about the ginger that's on the side of your sushi is that it's a pickled ginger, which falls into the lines of pickles in general. So I understand why people don't love that.
I never knew that until you just said that.
Yeah. Which I'm a huge fan of. Anything pickled put in front of me.
I love pickles generally. I didn't know that about that though.
Yeah. So
That explains it, because it's definitely a different flavor than, like, say, what you get when you drink, like, a ginger beer or something like that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Very interesting. Wow. Sarah, thank you for teaching us that.
welcome to ginger. And this is newfound to me. I am only just discovering it. So I'm sure there are many people out there listening that I've thoroughly offended with my lack of ginger knowledge, but that's okay. We're continuing on, and I am shouting out and becoming a better ginger lover because of it. So
We're not about knowing things on this podcast. We're about loudly proclaiming our feelings about them.
strong opinions. I can do that.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
All right. Excellent. Fantastic. Ginger. Looking forward to finding something to cook with ginger very soon.
Yeah, I'm gonna find something. I think I'm gonna try to find something for all of these ones that I'm not as familiar with.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to roll into number 4 there, Sarah?
Absolutely. So number 4 is, again, within the same vein of herb spice, and is something that's very near and dear to me, but is absolutely going to be polarizing to a lot of people. I think science has proven it's polarizing to people. It is the great cilantro.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. Love me some cilantro. I am one of those people that does not think it tastes like soap. So anytime I'm living anywhere within the Mexican Southwestern life of food, put some fresh cilantro on it, and I am a happy camper. It's also one of those spices, again, we were talking about the smell of basil that you just pick up when you're in a garden.
Yeah.
Fresh cilantro, when you cut that off the stem, it is so amazing to me, amazingly overwhelming in just an awesome way.
Yeah.
I happened to be in the cilantro camp. I remember a very specific time, me and my stepdad, Mark, were at my place alone. We decided to order a pizza from our favorite pizza place, Buddy's. I have a pizza that I love there called the Ontario, which is barbecue sauce with pineapple and ham. It's not for everybody.
Nope.
Now, it is for you, though.
But it is for me. I love the pizza. And Mark said, yeah, that sounds great. And I just forgot to mention that cilantro was on the pizza. Like, that's not like one of the main ingredients in my head. And it was a problem.
Wow.
Like, he was a man about it, and he, you know, he picked it at it and just dealt with it. But he was like, you didn't say there was cilantro on this. And like, I didn't realize it was such a big deal. I was like, well, no, I didn't mention it. It's just cilantro. He's like, it tastes like soap.
You kind of figured you had to clear the hurdles of like barbecue sauce and pineapples.
Isn't that funny? Like, that's the problem he had with the pizza. Like, and I'm not making fun of him. Like, I understand it now, and in retrospect, it makes a lot of sense. But prior to that, and this was only like a year ago, I had no idea that like there was this gap, this divide, this schism.
Yeah. It's a holy war. Caroline and I were discussing this the other day. Like, there are we have this thing at work where there's this big debate that goes on in our industry, and somebody coined it like, it's a holy war. It's just, nobody is going to give an inch. And I just love that concept, because you kind of have to recognize in life what things are holy wars. And you have to do your best to sort of like work on it at the margins, but you just know things aren't going to change. Cilantro, the battle for cilantro is one of those things. Like, I'm a cilantro is soap person.
Really?
Oh.
And I care deeply for both of you, but there's not a lot you're going to say. Like, this is just the way it goes. I do think that if I am in a nice Mexican restaurant and they have, I think cilantro appears in pico de gallo, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So like in a pico de gallo, I think cilantro is a very important element, and it needs it, and I like it, and I move on. And other than that, no. Tastes like soap.
Can you handle chipotle rice? Because they actively put fresh cilantro in all of their rice.
I think I had chipotle for the first time last week. Over the weekend. I want to say over the weekend.
For the first time in a few months?
What'd you say?
You mean like you had it for the first time in a few months after a break?
No, ever. It was at a catered function and there was Chipotle.
Sarah and I are literally staring at each other in disbelief. How come a man of your age never eaten Chipotle before? It's like,
I think
it's the damn cilantro.
Wow.
I think it's pretty well documented by you and probably by our listeners because they know me. I just miss some things. Like, there are certain
radio
things
on the internet.
like radio on the internet, Snapchat, and Chipotle, like, have just passed me by.
And Tangled.
I thought we were gonna
Tangled.
I thought we were gonna unearth some things with this top 10, some strong opinions, but never in my wildest dreams did I believe that we could discover Mike's lack of Chipotle.
You're like the oldest, you're like baby Diego. You're like the oldest person alive that hasn't had Chipotle.
Wow. Children of Men reference for those of you out there who are totally lost here. I am like baby Diego. And I'm not like Diego, the baby hunting Sabretooth in Ice Age. I'm like baby Diego.
Top 10 Diegos coming up next week.
Oh, that'd be really fun.
Anyways, I'm glad you're on the Chipotle train now.
Yes.
But I think this spice, we'll just have to wrestle with it a little bit when we do our ultimate ranking because it is, I like the way it's a holy war. Like, no one has ever convinced another person that, like, you know what? I think you're probably right. I think cilantro is probably okay. Like, that's
I can
never
jump that gap.
And no one has ever been like, all this time I've been a little wrong. I probably should ease up on the cilantro. Like, no one's ever been convinced one way or the other.
Once you find your stance on cilantro, it's not going anywhere.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, Sarah. That brings us to number 3, which means it's time to talk through your honorable mentions.
Oh boy. So as I mentioned earlier, I had a hard time picking out these honorable mentions. Like, I had a top 10 and then a next top 10 and then a next top 10 because when I was taking a look at possible spice racks to get, there were some that had, like the measly little, I think 24, just 2 rows of spices. Not allowed in my household.
For bitches.
Yeah. I went for the giant, like, this thing is at least a foot tall spice rack that just sits on the wall. That's how I knew I had an issue with spices or should I say a great relationship, was because I was tired of sorting through your little cabinet trying to find them. So that being said, honorable mentions. There's a couple. I'm going to try to keep it quick and simple.
Rapid fire honorable mentions. Love it.
So the one that probably is going to get some people, but I think we had a good conversation about it, was paprika. This is, again, one of those that is good enough to bring in, can't really stand upon its own, and I like cayenne better, so cayenne kicked paprika out of the top 10.
Paprika is one of the big 3 if you're making a chili or something like that.
Right.
It's paprika, cumin, cayenne, and probably, well, there's one more. But, like, it's like in that family of just, like, general zesty, like, spicy kind of.
Exactly.
And, like, one of them is probably going to get left out. Or 2, maybe. So, yeah.
I think it's a reasonable judgment. I'm with you. I just want to give my love of paprika shout out. It's great. It's different heat. It's kind of a sweeter heat. I like it. It's definitely more understated, and you're right. It probably deserves to be in the honorable mention category, but don't sleep on paprika. It's good spice.
I don't like to stay on it too long, but like any of the spices in that family, like they're somewhat interchangeable.
Right.
Like if you told me you were gonna go heavy on the paprika and go easy on the cumin, like it, it's yeah.
It's a really good point because that's probably the group that is most Googled. Conversion between paprika and cayenne.
Yeah.
I say that from extensive experience of doing that myself, but I also just knowing that happens a lot. Like, all right, let's just say you're a guy who doesn't have a big spice rack and he doesn't have any cayenne. How much paprika would I have to put in to replicate that?
So again, just missed it. Right outside, staring in, but wanting to call that out. Another one was turmeric. This is will stain your hands forever, not used often. When I first used it, couldn't actually open the top of my turmeric, so I just stabbed little holes and tried to get it out that way. But it was okay because you don't use it that often. But I feel like it is something that when you see it on a recipe, you're like, wait, I need what? And how?
It's definitely a niche spice.
Yeah.
I wish it were more of a niche spice because longtime girlfriend Caroline has been putting turmeric on her face as a nighttime skin treatment.
Whoa.
Yeah, so we went to Iceland like 6 months ago, and I was very concerned that we would be receiving a bill from the Airbnb because she stained all of the towels and sheets in the whole place yellow because she wears turmeric at night. And like if the two of us are sitting on my couch and it's like 8:30, she'll have a mask of turmeric on and she stinks. She stinks like turmeric. So I can't stand it.
Wow, so that goes in your not top 3 then.
It's like, I can't believe I didn't think of it. That is number 1 in my not top 3.
It's also, though, I enjoy it because you can also bring it into kombucha, which won't dive into kombucha that much, but
yeah,
big fan. And I
big fan.
Love that you can add turmeric into it and get a little bit of pop of flavor and then color on your teeth as well. Just great. 2 more I will call out and I'll leave the rest for people to guess on. Nutmeg. I wanted to bring up because
I like that.
This is one of those, don't use it that often, mostly in baking. Sometimes it can get brought into a savory dish, but again, very minuscule, and if you don't have it, it's not the worst thing in the world. But I think it does provide a pop of flavor, and sometimes I find myself when I'm trying to dissect dishes going, what does this taste like? What is that extra little thing? And it's always, not always, but sometimes nutmeg that just is bringing a little bit of extra zest into my life. So nutmeg, strong contender. Finally, the last one that I wanted to call out, again, it's in the same vein of nutmeg, is sugar, actually. So sugar, I think, can be used in, again, baking. That's a thing. But also in a lot of these savory dishes. I don't know. Do you bake with sugar? Maybe a little bit. But it's just a balance between when you have that salt or vinegar.
It's to cut. You use it to cut something.
Exactly.
Well, it's funny. I'm no mathematician, as you know, Kyle, but it's like one of those little plug figures. It's like, oh crap. I just spilled all of my cardamom in there. What the hell do I do? It's like, well, okay, let me Google how much sugar do I have to put in to cancel out 6 cups of cardamom.
It's the WD-40 of cooking mishaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like if I just drop her in, bloop, 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 all of that extra curry is gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
my argument against its inclusion on even an honorable mention list, and it's a silly one, is that it just doesn't qualify as a spice.
Yeah.
And the argument I would use to defend that position is at the beginning of the Powerpuff Girls theme, when he says,
I'm glad you brought this up.
sugar,
That is a very legitimate basis.
sugar and spice and everything nice.
Yep.
He doesn't say spices, including sugar. Sugar and spice. There's a distinction, and I think probably Professor Plutonium is, I would say, probably the authority on this type of thing.
Yeah.
So that's what
Most likely,
That's
yeah.
what I would say.
As someone who grew up absolutely in love with Powerpuff Girls and Mojo Jojo and everything involved in that comic, I will completely agree to take this out of the honorable mentions. Like you said, Professor Plutonium's got it in the bag. He knows what's up. Sugar's out.
Yeah.
I also, in a more real sense, I think it's a little separate from the feel of the list, but I think it's an honorable mention because you can use it.
Yeah. All right. With that, I will leave the rest of my bay leaves, onion powder, cream of tartar, and coriander off the list.
Wait, bay leaves,
Yeah.
coriander.
Cream of tartar?
Oh, is it different than tartar sauce?
Yes. and then also onion powder.
Onion powder.
Because those were, I feel like, all things in recipes that go, nice to have if you happen to find it, just rattling around in the back of your cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
Bay leaves, maybe not as much. A good bay leaf can add a lot of flavor to your dish, but it's just not necessary.
I think that bay leaves are interesting because they never feel necessary until you use them. And then when you've used it, you go, oh, that's why I was supposed to use that. Mm-hmm. So I agree. It's probably the first thing that gets bailed out of the ship, but it probably shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think you're onto something though.
I think this is certainly where it belongs, though.
Right.
It's an honorable mention.
Yes. Most likely.
Yes. So with that, I think we can go back into number 3.
Number 3, my lord!
Number 3. Number 3. This is something that is polarizing to a lot of people, not necessarily thought about, but a spice that I find myself always using. Again, pulling back my Cincinnati roots. It's the great cinnamon.
I will say, you guys in Cincinnati get really, like, a little outside the box with cinnamon, a little past my comfort zone. But go ahead and explain that.
Right. So to unbox that statement, if you're familiar with anyone from Cincinnati, you'll know that we have a certain tendency towards this dish called chili, and we have our way of doing things. It normally involves placing chili on spaghetti and combining it with cheese, which I didn't realize was weird until probably I was in high school. Only then
I didn't realize it existed until I visited your home.
Yeah.
And I knew immediately it was weird.
But it never occurred to me that you wouldn't eat chili without pasta. That's not how you do things.
Yep.
Who knew? So I grew up with chili that I think it's based out of a Greek dish originally, but Cincinnati chili has cinnamon in it as one of those core spices. And it's something that I don't recognize at all, but then I find myself inserting into a lot of my savory dishes. So because of that tie back to my home and the fact that I use it all the time, it definitely hit number 3 for me right there as could not function without. In addition to just your sweet dishes that you're going to be making with cinnamon.
I'm totally down with this. I actually also put cinnamon in my chili. I didn't know that was a Cincinnati thing or really, I guess, I don't know that I took that from anywhere. I just thought it would be nice one time and then got really into it. I love putting cinnamon in my chili, and I think it's just really good kind of in a lot of savory dishes. I had something, I'm trying to remember where this was from. I think it was a Moroccan dish I made one time. And it was a chicken that had cinnamon in it, and it was just divine. It was so good. It was one of those dishes that I couldn't have screwed that dish up if I had wanted to. It just had, the flavor profile was so nice, and the cinnamon was a big part of it.
I'll piggyback on that and say I use cinnamon when I make chimichangas. It pairs really well with like a onion pepper chicken mix.
Yeah.
I was like kind of surprised to see that on the list, and really glad that I did that. I don't put cinnamon in my chili. I use brown sugar, but that's basically the same concept.
Yeah.
But
I respect that it's the same concept, but not the same thing.
It's definitely not the same.
Cinnamon falls into the realm of being the safer pick here, because cinnamon, it's a little easier to sort of dial it in precisely as opposed to something like a brown sugar. I think that is typically the risk with introducing sugar into a dish like a chili, is that if you overdo it, you kind of have lost, in my opinion, you've lost what makes it. But I think cinnamon you can kind of dial up more thoughtfully.
And then, like, let's not forget, you can use cinnamon in a variety of other contexts. It's not just savory food, like primarily used outside of this context. So it's great variety and a very wide range of things you can use it for. And really the only sweet one on this list so far.
Yep.
Yeah.
It plays well with others, and it's such a crucial part to how I cook. So it had to come in at number 3 and just really pop up and be that strong contender in the list.
Sure.
I think it definitely has a distinct place on this list. I would be very surprised if it slipped much beyond 3. It's a really strong entry on this list.
So then number 2, what topped the cinnamon in my world was garlic. I know we talked a little bit about garlic before when we brought up the terrible garlic flakes, but
yeah.
Garlic in both forms. I brought in powder just because I know people use it, but really that pure sense of like bust open a clove, get you some good garlic, and you can use it in so many dishes, dressings, roasted vegetables, meats, like roasted garlic hummus is my favorite thing. It's so amazing, and it's one of those things, too, that you just throw out the recipe when you see 2 cloves, and I find myself going, okay, 7 cloves. Excellent. Cooking well tonight.
I do tend to go heavy on the garlic. That's true. I'll say, for me, garlic powder is most useful when I like to make garlic toast, like garlic bread as a side.
Yes.
Using oil and garlic powder on top and throwing it in the oven, like from a practicality point of view, is easier than using real garlic on it.
That's true.
Or I might sprinkle it on eggs, like scrambled eggs.
Yep.
Other than that, I can't think of like too many more applications for it. But garlic, you can put garlic in literally anything and it's better.
Yeah. Kyle, you might be busy next time you see Caroline, but if you find a couple minutes, ask her about her use of garlic powder in making everything bagels. She has some everything bagel mix or something that she uses on avocado toast. So she'll take avocado toast, she'll take toast, put avocado, and then she has, I don't know if she makes it or buys it, some mix that tastes like everything bagel, and she puts it on top, and she loves it. And it's very garlic powder oriented.
I'm going to be busy next time I see Linus, but I will make time for this.
Yeah. Ooh. I think it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So garlic, huge power hitter.
Yeah.
Definitely comes in at my number 2 spot just because of the blanket of things that are covered by that.
Well, can I say the interesting thing about garlic is I think it's one of, I would say it's one of two, like spice/vegetables that when you smell it sauteing, it means good food is coming no matter what. It's that and onions. Yes. When you smell onion sauteing or you smell garlic sauteing, there doesn't have to be anything else. Your mouth just starts watering uncontrollably. And it's crazy because garlic, if you were to just say like eat a clove of garlic, it's gross.
Yeah.
But that sound, that smell is so rich and so inviting. Oh, so good. I'm hungry.
I've discovered that the only thing that you need to do to make people think that you're cooking up a storm is just start sauteing an onion. That's it. That's it.
People walk in the kitchen like, oh, what's cooking? It's like one onion. There is one onion.
Singular onion here.
Yeah, we're going to be doing the Stanley Yelnats special. We'll be eating onions like apples tonight.
Perfect.
What's Mariolo?
What is it?
And on that note, what's number 1?
Number 1. I think, Kyle, you know where we're headed with this. Probably not a lot of others who aren't as close to me will know, but the number 1 spice on my list was always going to end up here. It's chili powder. It is chili powder. Again, growing up in Cincinnati, where I think a lot of my life was surrounded by chili and eating chili at least once a week, and not just Cincinnati style chili, but dump chili, everything in between. I devour that spice. And as Kyle mentioned, red pepper flakes was his first kilt it completely spice. I went through an entire, I forget what size, but just your standard size of spice. Went through that in about a year after I graduated and started cooking on my own pretty consistently. I now have, I think, 3 almost, not tons, we'll call it, but really big jars of chili powder always available in my kitchen because it's not just for chili. I use it in Mexican dishes, Indian dishes, Mediterranean dishes. I use it when I'm cooking eggs. It is my go-to sprinkle on anything, and you just elevate it enough. It's the one that I always will top over cumin. When there's a recipe that's like 2 teaspoons of cumin and 1 of chili powder, I'm like, we're flipping that. Reverse. And again, roasting vegetables, it just goes across the board. I find myself using it so much in everything that I cook. Definite bias on this one, but had to come in at number 1 for me when I was crafting this list, just because I use it so often. And it's a major staple in everything that I do.
Well, it's an incredibly versatile spice. For me, I would group this, this functions a lot like cumin and paprika. It has a lot of the same notes for me, and I find I cook with them in tandem a lot. But I would say, behind crushed red pepper, this is one in my cabinet that goes fast.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I'm going to have a hard time putting chili powder above garlic.
Yeah.
Because I think garlic is king, and I think chili powder suffers from the issue that I was mentioning a little bit earlier, I think, with cayenne, which is that it requires a certain environment that you have to introduce it into to make it kind of work in its state, which is that powdery form. But that's a minor issue in what is a wonderful spice with a great variety of applications. So I think it deserves to be very high on this list.
Yeah.
But I don't know. My inclination initially would be to put garlic and cinnamon higher.
Okay. We'll get into it. We'll get into it. And we're encroaching on a pretty lengthy podcast here. So Mike, let's go through some of our honorable mentions that we think deserve consideration, and then we'll get into this thing. What do you have?
So for honorables, I think 2 that Sarah mentioned that I do think are great but honorable would be onion powder and bay leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Great, honorable. One that I don't know if we're counting because it sort of straddles this interesting line would be mint.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we count it, mint would likely be very high on this list. I don't know. Some of our Greek friends might argue that it ought to be included in this list, but I think it somehow feels a little bit separate. And then I think 2 that I'm a little less serious about would be curry powder. I really love curry powder, and I think it has applications well beyond Indian cuisine. I love curry powder in chili. I put a little bit in my chili.
Mm.
I like red curry powder or yellow curry powder. Both are very tasty. So that's one that I think is kind of an honorable mention. And I think you probably would get... I occupy an odd space on this because my family's not Indian. And so I don't have a tradition of Indian cooking in my family. So I really like it. But I think people who are probably have, a longer tradition of Indian cooking, my impression is that powdered curry is not a very popular solution. So it occupies a bit of a weird space. Allspice, I'm all about allspice. So allspice, I think, is a borderline contender. It's a really funky little spice that works just as well in something like a one of your favorites, Kyle, a carrot cake or a pumpkin pie, something like that, as it does, once again, in my chili. It's a really interesting taste. It's a little bit like cinnamon. It's very versatile in its flavor profile. I think allspice would warrant some consideration at the back end of this list. But the only one that I really want to stump for would be fennel. So I think fennel deserves to be on this list. Fennel is great as an add-in to a lot of recipes. Anytime you want to do some sort of stuffed meat dish, you're going to find fennel seeds are going to be in there. So if you do a chicken stuffed with prosciutto, you should put some fennel seeds in there. Fennel seeds, you don't even know it. You consume a lot of them in any Italian sausage you have. That is the most important piece of that flavor. I think fennel seeds should be everywhere, and I would argue that they deserve to be somewhere in the 5 to 8 range.
Wow.
Yeah, but that's the only one that I'm really serious about. I think you did a great job. I think there's a little bit of reordering to be done, but as far as stuff that needs to get added, I think fennel is the big one. And maybe allspice, but
yeah,
I'm not going to
allspice is definitely in the nutmeg contender in my head. Definitely gets used in a lot of those baking dishes that you do and provides a little bit of extra kick, but doesn't necessarily top out some of the more savory ones.
I think you're probably right about that. I just happen to really like it. So I'm okay with that living at, like, mentally number 10.5.
I don't have any I'm super serious about. I would throw rosemary on there.
Oh, I'm now serious about rosemary. Yes. Rosemary's a good,
That might have been a deliberate leave out of this conversation.
Well, that's foolishness then.
Yeah. It's one of those very overwhelming tastes to me, and so I just don't keep it around that often. And like the worst thing that you can do to a nice, like, crispy breakfast potato, in my opinion, is put rosemary in it. Like, what are you doing?
It's really easy to burn accidentally, and it's also easy to get confused on what a bunch of rosemary is. Oh, a bunch of rosemary! And just, like, chuck a bunch of it in there.
But, tastefully done, all the hipster places nowadays will give the option to put rosemary on fries. And that's really good. Oh,
it's even good in a drink. It's even tasty in some drinks. I think rosemary, like a nice actual sprig of rosemary laid onto a rotisserie chicken.
Yeah.
Or like a whole oven baked chicken. It's just a beautiful sight. Oh, tasty.
Speaking of drinks, that's one of the reasons I want to actually lobby for mint a little bit, because if you've ever consumed a mint julep, having a sprig of mint is, it's one of my favorite alcoholic beverages, and the mint is probably like 70% why.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is, mint. Sorry, you go.
My grandpa grows a lot of mint in his garden, and as a kid, I would go into his garden and just pick it and just like chew on it. Because it's my favorite herb, and I don't cook with it a lot, but mint is my favorite flavor, and there's enough you can do with the herb itself that I think it actually probably belongs. The last one is more of a personal thing because my mom cooks with it a lot, specifically on her pork chops, is the lemon pepper.
Oh, yeah.
I associate it, like, very specifically with pork chops, and whenever I make them, I cook with lemon pepper, and I don't really use it on a lot of other things, except maybe I might throw it on chicken, but that's just personal.
Again, back to the fresh tomatoes, my grandfather, my mom's mom, would just chop up fresh tomatoes, throw a little bit of lemon pepper on it, and that's all you need on a nice summer day.
Love lemon pepper. I think its uses are probably limited enough that it's an honorable mention.
Also, does it fall into the rule of no pepper and salt?
I think I would exclude it from that rule because it doesn't really... Because pepper is so ubiquitous, right? Whereas lemon pepper is really not used outside of a few contexts. I think... I think they're different enough in that way. I wasn't going to lobby hard for it to be on the list anyways. I think we're probably serious about mint, fennel. I'm actually not super serious about rosemary, but if
I think I am. I think you were right to add that for consideration.
Okay. So in your mind, what looks vulnerable on Sarah's list?
I would say oregano feels vulnerable.
Agreed.
I would agree.
I think that cumin feels a little bit vulnerable, but I would understand if you guys disagree. I mean, cilantro. But
wait a minute. Before we get too much further, I just want to add that you said one of my favorites was carrot cake, and that was a joke. I really do not like carrot cake very much. I want to have that record straight. I just
that was like
said
20 minutes ago, and
known.
I'm very glad you made sure that people knew that.
It's not that I don't like carrot cake. It's just that one time you tried to argue that it was better than apple pie, and I got mad. So
I would stand by that argument.
We don't have time, but go ahead.
We could talk about that another day. This is the issue with this list. Oregano. What do you see as vulnerable? Oregano is the only one that really pops to me.
I think we should not group. I don't think we should group, but I think we should pick like one of the savory spices. Like we have cayenne and cumin and chili powder that are largely functioning in very similar ways. You can kind of throw crushed red pepper in there. I think that I want to keep crushed red pepper.
I think it's distinct enough that it shouldn't be considered as part of
I think we could bop cayenne, though.
I think up to 2 of cayenne, cumin, and chili powder can get up to 2. I think at least cayenne probably is off.
I think that probably is cayenne then. So I think cayenne and oregano, and I would be willing to let go of rosemary.
Okay. That's fine with me because I really like cumin and would hate to see it get off this list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As much as I dislike it, I still think it's a major player.
Well, I think this has been working for us recently, Kyle. I think that we could probably build from the top here because I think the top couple feel pretty obvious.
Yes.
So do we kind of feel if I were doing my top couple, I'm probably going maybe garlic, cinnamon, mint is probably like 1, 2, 3.
So I have a problem with mint being that high.
I think it's a little aggressive for mint just because of, in my opinion, it's somewhat limited applicability in actual like cooking. For me, it's like almost purely like a garden and like a tea, like herb.
Right.
I still would like it to be like on the top half of the list, but I think 3 is probably a little aggressive. What do you think?
I agree, and I think if we're looking at spices too as the cross-platform variety that you can use in different cuisines, mint doesn't necessarily have that carryover.
Here's a hot take.
I think that's fair, but it is such a crucial herb.
I don't want it to fall too far, but here's a hot take, maybe. I think cilantro belongs on the list. I think given the divisive nature of it, I think it should go down a little bit.
I would agree.
I think in that place, we should bump basil up really high.
I'm interested in that.
Are you potentially interested in basil like as high as like a 3 or 4?
I would be interested in basil at 4 if we put chili powder at 3.
I would agree with that.
Agreed.
Because I think we have to keep at least one of those core trios in
one of the
top.
spicy guys.
Yep.
I would then, in my opinion, I think it would be wrong to put mint any lower than 5 though, because if we think it should be included on this list, that means we are comfortable with its merits as a sort of non-cooking spice. And if we're comfortable with its merits as a non-cooking spice, then we need to consider its merits as a non-cooking spice, which are considerable. Like, mint is probably, I would be willing to bet that in a poll of tastes around the world, mint is probably the most popular taste. Mint, everybody loves mint.
Listen, mint is my favorite flavor. You don't have to convince me. I'm trying to be like impartial here.
But I'm trying to be impartial too. I think if we should either have mint not be on this list or it should be represented very high. And I think 5 would be an appropriate place for it.
I could get behind that, especially as a fellow mint flavor lover.
Let's do it then. Let's put mint at 5, which means our bottom 5 in some order are going to be cilantro, ginger, crushed red pepper, cumin,
and fennel.
Do you want to work from the back again? Because I think fennel's probably 10.
I agree. I don't think most people would like be able to identify fennel in a lineup, taste lineup.
They wouldn't know it, but they know, sure do.
Yeah, agreed.
I would then slot cilantro in as a number 9 just because of its polarizing taste.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah,
I don't think crushed red pepper should be below.
I think ginger needs to be above crushed red pepper if we're talking about variety again.
I would probably go, if I went basil mint, I would go ginger, crushed red, cumin.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel really good about that. What do you think?
I like this list.
Mike?
I'm so into this list. I'm so hungry.
I think we've just developed the definitive top 10 list of herbs and spices.
Stamp it, copyright.
Yeah.
This is it. Sarah, do you want to recap for us?
To quote Afro Man, I gave her my special blend of herbs and spices.
Oh, thank you, Mike. There it is.
This will be used in all culinary schools from this point forward.
Your assignment. Listen to episode whatever this is.
Perfect. But yeah, to take us from the bottom to the top with the sneaky intro from our honorable mentions to number 10, we have our fennel, followed by cilantro at number 9 and cumin at 8. Then we get into Kyle's love of the crushed red pepper at number 7, ginger at number 6, and mint with the out of left field, number 5. Closing out our you just missed the podium, Basil, at number 4. And our solid 3 of chili powder with the bronze cinnamon coming in at 2. And our number 1 herb and spice, garlic.
What a delight, Sarah.
Damn.
Deepest apologies for having it take so long, but we're glad we finally made this happen.
Thank you so much for having me.
This show is all about picking a good topic and having the right people on it. And you picked a great topic, and you are most certainly the right person to be with us for this evening.
Excellent. I'm glad we could morph this out of a lovely conversation that Kyle and I started many moons ago.
Looking forward to your next one, which I'm sure will be Cincinnati Reds related.
Yeah, now that we've talked about it,
now
it's coming in.
Now that you've ingratiated yourselves with the listening public, it's time to go deep on a Reds podcast, probably.
I'll tell you what, Kyle and I are already ready with our top 10 best things about the Great American Ballpark.
Oh, perfect.
We're ready. We loved everything about it, and we're ready to roll.
Yeah, I will be here for it and start prepping now.
Awesome. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right, see you, buddy.
Adios. Alrighty, friends. That was our top 10 for this week, but now we'd love to hear your top 10. So please check us out on all of our available social media outlets, traditional outlets, whatever outlets we have. Check us out on Twitter at top10km. That's all spelled out, top10km. Our email, top10km, spelled the same way, at gmail.com, or our site, top10km.podbean.com. All forms of communication accepted, except for serial killer notes. Please don't send us any of those.
If you like the pod, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never have to miss an episode of Top 10 ever again. If you didn't like it, please tell us why. We'll try to make the show better. Our theme music was composed by Kevin MacLeod, and our artwork was created by Erin Sant. You can check out her stuff at Sant Design on Instagram.
Alrighty, goons. We'll see you next week.